This is going to be live, so don't mess it up.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, I'm posting it to the group here. All right, gentlemen, let us pray.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Saint Michael the Archangel, be our defender in battle. Protect us against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits seeking the ruin of souls. Amen.
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 In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and of course, a hearty
Deus Vult!
Good job, guys. Good job.
Cheers.
Welcome to Men with Chest, dear listeners or viewers. We don't have any yet. We have 0, but we could get some. Tonight I have Sean Smith and James Aruda. How do you pronounce your last name, James? I think I may have messed
up. Oh, no, you got it. Aruda.
Perfect. Well, guys, how's your week been? How's Lent going?
We haven't even done a week of Lent yet, so I guess not bad.
Yeah, that's good. How about you, Sean? How's it going for you?
Been busy. I mean, when you have 2 kids, there's really not much in the way of downtime. At least, not unless one of you can, afford to stay at home, and in that case, then have the house in order and 2 kids and be able to do other things. But both of us work, so anyway.
Such is life.
I just wonder what does someone with kids give up for Lent? Because it always seems like you never have time to do anything sinful.
Well, for one thing, it's not supposed to be something sinful because you're not supposed to be doing those anyway.
Fair point.
As far as I understand it. Well, and I said this last time, I'm actually kind of terrible at this. I didn't grow up with Lent, so I'm not used to trying to think in these terms. So last year I gave up arguing about politics on the internet for 40 days. I could still read it, but I couldn't engage in arguments was my thing. So
yeah,
but
healthy. Arguing about politics on Facebook is not a productive activity. I've done it many times over the last 15 years, really. And let me tell you, well, I can't say that it hasn't. See, when I was a libertarian, I used to be, gangbusters arguing about politics. And I actually converted a few leftists to becoming libertarian. I don't know if they would directly attribute their conversion to me, but I know secretly that that's why they changed. Because they were just, Democrats.
There's unfortunately these days. There's also the question of how much of the motivation is I just want to smoke weed.
Yeah. Well, if you follow any of the we call it convergence and all that stuff, all the libertarians that were really libertarian are now right libertarians, and it's all because you had like naked people running across stages, but that's all inside LP baseball.
That's true. I know they all left and became part of the NRX community and part of even some of the alt-right community. That's change. I know we mentioned that on a previous show, but
yeah, I think 80% of my Facebook interaction has been arguing about politics, and no good has ever come of it. And
no.
Well, okay. Now here's the thing, and this is something I kind of had the idea in mind before, but I picked up the formulation from Larry Correia. I think that's how you say his last name. It's not spelled anyway, but and he said, the point of arguing, the point of debating someone is not to convince the other person. That is extraordinarily unlikely. The point of arguing about something is one, to sway bystanders, to influence people who are watching, who aren't necessarily engaging, and two, to give ammunition to your side, to help other people, on the same team as you, them see, oh, hey, here's an argument I can use in our case.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not have been as fruitless as you think.
Yeah, it's true. There's always somebody out there watching who might be like, oh, thank God, somebody thinks how I do and is willing to say it. One thing that was, I don't know about you all, it was weird for me.
What was weird?
Oh, I was just going to say, quick aside, like I did the whole libertarian thing for a while, and then I got more into, well, the catechism says that the state is, something that can exist, and I had to reconcile that. And so now I'm a little more monarchical, or at least Catholic social teaching pro. So like the whole idea of like talking about politics online, it went from this very easy, like libertarian, don't aggress, like just hammer, hammer, don't aggress, to like, well, now I have a nuanced position that if you aren't thinking about it, a commie is going to be like, yeah, that sounds great. Like, well, no, it's not for the same reason. Let's go into the background of it. And I'm too tired. I can't.
Yeah, there's an interesting critique of libertarianism. It tends to be well over 90% male and white. I don't know if you've noticed that being in the past. And it's because white males just want to be left alone. They feel like their civilization is being taken from them. Their money is being taken out of their checks to fund social programs for people who hate their guts. And they, instead of standing up for themselves, they're saying, just stop taking money out of my check and leave me alone, right? Instead of saying, no, this is wrong. You can't.
Well, this is kind of,
because of
what
God made me,
it's kind of the Hoppian thing too is, well, we can talk about those rights, but we, have to, so to speak, some people out of society that will keep that from us achieving that goal.
Yeah.
So
well, enough about libertarianism. Let's talk about Okay. We got some interesting news stories. Oh, I do want to plug the interview coming up in the second hour of the show. It's with the inestimable Nick B. Steves from nickbsteves.blogspot, I think. And he's also part of Social Matter and the Hestia Society. He's a great NRX thinker and blogger. I know James is a fan, so stay tuned for that. It's a great interview. Stay tuned to find out why America may become the first Mormon monarchy, actually.
Ooh.
I know. Sounds weird, but hey.
So wait, if they reach that point, do you think they'll reinstitute polygamy? Because cutting it out was basically a political concession.
Yeah, no, I think they would actually if they reach that point. I mean, I think polygamy is wrong and leads to a lot of bad social consequences. But if you belong to a religion that at one time thought it was right, I mean, why wouldn't you? Let's just be honest.
Yeah, putting the more back in Mormon.
That's right. Okay, gents. James, you said you were reading a book and you want to talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Cool. So let's see, about since the last time I was on the show, I think that was last year. A friend I made on the internet from reading Augustine's City of God recommended this little book, The End of the Modern World, or The End of, put it in front of the light, by Romano Guardini. It was written in 1956. He's a German priest. And basically, the book has like 6-7 thoughts in it because it's really a collection of essays. And he goes through how man's relationship with nature has changed and what that means for the modern world. So it used to be that man saw himself as part of nature and walled off. And then Christianity came, and we were sort of part of nature, but there was something eternal beyond it that we were part of. But that when you got later and more in the modern world, we took over nature. And instead of having an infinite beyond it, nature became the infinite. And we started gathering power over it. And he just talks about how our relationship with nature, our relationship with power, has kind of this equal and opposite effect on each other. And he builds it up into several different little concepts. One is the concept of mass man, which is don't know if you've ever heard of Bugman.
Yes.
the
Yes.
small. So it's basically that, but in 1956. The idea that our work and our technology and all these things actually restrict our freedom and force us into little categories where we can only perceive, following the herd, as it were. And the funny thing is, he has this section I highlighted where he says that the leaders of the mass man movement are themselves mass men. So if you imagine like how boring and uninspiring Mark Zuckerberg is, like he nailed it, right? It's just some, some guy in a junk T-shirt. Not that I'm on to talk here, but he's not bringing anything new and original. He's just as along with the flow of mass consumption, mass media. Surrender your personality to somebody else's anonymous power, and that's where Gardini gets into the idea of what power is, which is kind of a mix of, it has to be an idea plus will. You have to be actually out. So he actually says ideas are not powerful, that it takes an act of will to move on with it. And then he talks about how people, give up their power to the state or to anonymous sources because they love the idea that it strips responsibility from them, right? So they love this idea of giving other people power because they think it removes responsibility. But one of his big points is that, that responsibility is still there. And that's why I kind of like it's kind of this like third law idea of equal and opposite, where, no matter what's happening, we can't fake responsibility. We can't get rid of that. That power's out there and it's doing something. So the end of the book is kind of a call for new man to really understand what it is to be human and what our power is. And he talks a lot about how God, and especially Jesus, understood this kind of power and showed us through humility the right way to master it, to make our own power not be power over us, but for others in service of truth. And, he talks about, I don't know how to say it right, ascetism, ASCETISM, basically the self, control and mastery of yourself.
Okay.
Asceticism. Wait, asceticism?
Yeah, asceticism. Well, but there's not like a second, it's just like ascetism.
Yeah, I think it's actually a different word. I think you got it right.
Yeah, so
I'm not familiar with them.
So, like I said, this book has like 8 or 6 ideas running around in it. But it's actually pretty short, and I don't know. It's just it seems in some ways like kind of NRX, but written before it was popular. And like I said, the Bugman idea is in there. All these kind of different ideas, all that I've seen floating around, but all in one like small source. So I can't recommend it enough. And then because he got me thinking about ascetism, I started reading about the Desert Fathers. So that's
I think it is asceticism, because I looked up ascetism and I'm not seeing an English word that is. Well, while you're looking it up, I wanted to comment that the way you were describing it almost sounded like a bizarro Nietzsche or something. You're talking about the need for exercising the will to make your ideas come to fruition, and also talking about the need for a new man to develop over the bug man and ultimately try bug man society. But this is a Catholic book, right?
Yeah, and he actually has a lot in there against Nietzsche. But kind of that
horseshoe theory.
Yeah. Well, so his idea of the new man is really just he recognizes, or what he believes is, we can't always look back and we can't return to what classical man was, even though classical man had a lot of good things. So he's trying to say is like, look, we're in a situation now where our relationship with nature and work and technology is so askew that we have to reorient ourselves to God. But how do we do that now? So that's the new man. And then he says we have to accept the reality that we do have power, because we make choices with our will that do things in the world that aren't natural. And we have to turn that toward God. So that's, it's not like a will to power kind of thing, or, I'm finding my true self through what I desire. It's an orientation toward truth and revelation. And that's a constant theme through the book. Is he's always bringing up, is like, you can't do this without revelation.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts on that, Sean?
Not really anything to add. Well, give me a moment. The main thing is that, like, any ideas that are worth anything, or at least in terms of like philosophy, technology is a different kind of thing, but any ideas that are worth anything, they're probably not 100% new. Someone's been talking about these ideas before. And if you hear someone come up with something entirely novel, that might just mean it's garbage. And so yeah, it's, I'm not at all surprised that that he was, that someone was writing about this ahead of time, and writing about this 60 years ago, and talking about some of these ideas. It also reminds me a little bit of the one moment. A little bit of C.S. Lewis, and actually the book that the podcast takes a name from, and The Abolition of Man. And he says that ultimately what we call power over nature is going to become the power of some men over other men, and that's where it's headed. And you can't, and just embracing these things amorally, embracing and not thinking about the consequences is can be very dangerous, can be a very dangerous road. So
I think that's exactly, that's right. And I looked at it, for some reason I kept reading the word asceticism and ascetic wrong. You guys are right.
Okay. I thought I heard that word before, but apparently it was a miscommunication. I probably just wanted to seem smart, like, oh yeah, I've heard that before.
I'm sure you have. It helps if I say it right. So we'll fix this in post. It's not a live show.
Well, I'm gonna publish it as a podcast too, so I can edit.
No.
I probably won't, but I could edit it. Okay, let's see here. I wanted to do a little side note about the Bugman because you mentioned it. It's sort of an urban phrase, urban dictionary type phrase that's been floating around in right-wing circles, and really, it's a person who's obsessed with consumerism and being trendy, and is usually very left-leaning, and it has lost all sense of the transcendent. And that's because the West has been gutted of its sense of the transcendent, and at least as a cultural center. So I want to read this little description here because I think it's interesting. A Bugman is your typical big left-leaning city dweller. He's usually obsessed with consumerism, lining up to purchase the newest iPhone or MacBook when it comes out, and using a smartwatch or smart home speaker for longer than the week after he bought it. Chances are he owns other throwaway smart gadgets as well. All his tastes in movies, music, expensive food, art, and more are determined by what review sites and blogs say. Everything about his personality and life is not defined by who he is, but by what he buys and his consumerist tendencies. He'll be subscribed to at least one, maybe multiple subscription services. He'll happily use social media and upload all his information to the cloud, and he'll gravitate toward things that seem rational and use big words. So I won't read the rest of it, but I'm sure you know people like this, and I'm sure there's even parts of your own behavior that sort of resonate with this description. I think this is the type of person that the big gay empire, the Globo Homo Googleplex, wants to produce. These people are easy to control. They're highly atomized. Their identity is in what they buy. They're consumers, right? So do your best to fight against this. Wage an inner crusade to speak against your inner Bugman.
Are we sliding into Fight Club? Are we?
Well, what's weird is how Bugman is, or how Fight Club is now so Bugman. like everybody latched onto it as the cool thing.
Yeah, that too. Well, it's one of those things where like you look at, I haven't read the book, I admit. I've read one of what's his name? Nick. I've read one of Paul Nick's other books, and I don't think I will again. Not bad writing, but just the utter. It's just a very toxic mindset. Very, I mean, completely sick.
Yeah.
It's interesting seeing the thought processes of someone who is in a moment, someone who can accurately diagnose a lot of problems, but can't even imagine, a solution.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, yeah.
I want to just
Generation X thought leader, the guru. He kind of distilled their whole ethos into that novel. That's why it became so huge. But anyway, go ahead, James.
I just want a quick sentence from the book about Mass Man. Mass Man acts almost as if he felt that to be oneself was both the source of all injustice and even a sign of peril. Which, I don't know, when I read that was, right, the idea that not going along with something else is a source of peril it's predictive, it seems. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that is good. Definitely very prophetic. So I'll link that book in the show notes for anyone who wants to purchase and read it. Sounds like a good one. So let's see here. Moving on, let's talk about some Catholic stuff here. See, Sean, you shared this article with the group. I think so. From LifeSite News by Anthony Esselin. The Catholic Church's priest short crisis, a self-inflicted wound. So, did you want to lead off on this one?
Well, it's I ran across this some time ago, so it's not a new article, but it's perfectly relevant today still, and it's he's addressing the same problems are ongoing, and a large part of what he says, and this isn't just the Catholic Church, this is Christian churches in general. They've the church has almost completely abandoned anything that inspires and calls to men and even fight, and then well, where did all the men go?
Yeah.
Why? And to be more specific, he says there's no rigor, there's no sense of demand, there's no sense of in a lot of places of that this is not easy, that this is not and that this is not everybody can do, that this is something that you've really got to strive for. And there's also decreasingly anything like a male space, anything specifically for men, anything for where men can learn, not even learn, but just understand, talk about things that matter to us, because well, that's discriminatory, although somehow we're still allowed to have all kinds of women's spaces. But and if you even talk about the idea of a man's of a space for men to come together and talk about things that matter to them, and talk about things that that they're trying to understand, the picture that a lot of people will immediately get in their heads is a bunch of guys just talking about sports and drinking, and the hot chick who works at the restaurant that he goes to at lunch, and so even the idea of men talking with other men about serious things has been just derided and kind of driven into the ground in our culture, and it's
wreaking havoc. It's not just in the church, but in the culture at large, as you said.
Yeah, and I think I've I grew up before this had so completely taken over. I think I may have escaped the absolute worst of its effects, but I mean, for young men growing up today, it's just absolute disaster.
Yeah. Now, I think in a certain sense there was, I'm not sure if it was an intent, what I believe being the conspiratorial one, it was an intentional agenda to destroy masculinity and to feminize the culture. Why? Because if a man is mature and understands who he is and how God made him, and if he has a stake in the society, if he has skin in the game, if he has wife and kids, and he's the part of a community and a leader at church, and he's been at his job for 15 years, and you try to mess with that, if you try to take his rights away or whatever, he will fight you. He will band together with other men and he will fight you physically. Women don't do that generally.
Well, and the other thing, and the other thing I was just thinking of, like, women, you can't, in some way, you can't say women won't fight, because I mean, if you threaten a woman's children, like you've just done something possibly pretty dangerous if she has anything to say about it. But at the same time, I don't think women fight until it reaches that point, whereas men seem to look a little more ahead and say, oh, this is going that way. This is where we are headed. Let's settle this before it reaches that point.
Right.
Yeah. If you look at like the family is like a domestic, well, I mean, the original derivation or the word economy was to managing a household, and in the tradition there, the wife, the mother, was the domestic policy holder, and the man was the foreign policy holder. If we're going to take broad strokes, and
as it should be.
Well, the thing is, though, right, that we've kind of we've taken we've made all of culture now. The way government acts, it's now taken all the domestic. Well, it's now taken upon itself the household's foreign policy as its own domestic policy, and stripped out the good of those relationships.
Well, and also the other thing is everything is being treated as, like, if you're in a family and you're a mother trying to manage children, and someone says something that hurts someone else's feelings, that's a problem and you need to address it. But if your society says something that hurts someone else's feelings, that's the problem for those two to figure out on their own. You leave it alone. It's not your deal. But now, we have this, highly maternal, oh no, I've got to make sure no one feels excluded. It's a very, maternal way of viewing these problems.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I love about Esselin's writing. A lot of his recent writing too, in articles, has been very focused on raising boys, and a lot of his critique of modern culture is just how it just doesn't help raise boys. It's not fit to do anything even close to that. And yeah, but I mean, to be able to raise boys well, you have to have an idea of what masculinity is, and that it's a good thing, and that it's there's an end for it. But I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sean, you were saying that there's really no more spaces in the public square, at school, at church, for men to be men, to hash things out in a masculine way, to feel comfortable with who they are, and to just be themselves. And I'll tell you what, this is going to have, and already has, obviously, had really bad consequences, but you have a whole generation of kids who have been raised in this highly feminized culture, boys, and they know what it's like to be raised in that culture, and they're angry, especially because we've gutted our culture of Christianity, so they don't have that to look to for turn the other cheek. So basically, you have this entire generation that's about to turn 18, and they're pissed off, and they hate the society that their parents and their grandparents have given to them, and I think it's going to turn out really bad for us for what we've done to our boys. I think we have a very fashion coming up, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, some of the people on the internet joke that when this generation is old enough, they're just going to hang us all. And some of these people are like, yeah, maybe we deserve it.
The rope is upon us, gentlemen, and we might deserve it.
It's like, I was on this podcast, guys. Find my side.
It's true, man. It's funny, but it's true.
The problem with a problem with when it arrives at that kind of anger is, and especially if you're talking about at a mass level, is that at that level people stop this between the guilty and the innocent. It's anyone who looks vaguely like the person I blame, and so it's it could be it could be very bad indeed.
Yeah, I think it will be bad, and like I think we do deserve it too. I mean, our culture is riddled with sin and irresponsibility. I mean, there are consequences for those things. So,
well, when you think about, like, it's an opportunity for the church, especially, to put out, to reassert its manly mission, to reassert a call for the priesthood. I mean, if you got all these people out there who are like, I feel these drives, like Esalen describes, of what it means to be a man. Like, you're inspired by discipline, by authority, by virtuous conflict. Well, the priesthood's a really good place for that. It's a different form than people are used to, but it's a really good place for that. So true. I don't know, like the fact that, like, I don't know, this is going to sound weird, but the fact that, like, vocations videos don't look like ISIS propaganda videos.
That doesn't sound weird at all. What are you talking about? That's perfect.
Well, no, I'm saying, like, they advertise with, like, come be, manly and fight and take what is yours, and right, like, there's all this, like, stuff that, like, obviously it's harnessed for an evil and wrong direction, but they understand the instinct. And
absolutely, the Catholic Church should hire the same people who do the commercials and stuff. And I'm serious. And they'll, like, put, like, Crusader imagery in there and show, like, BA Inquisitors from the Spanish Empire and just make them look awesome. You could do that kind of stuff with lighting and music, and just remind
the same
people
guy,
Catholic Church
the same guy to say
a very
global force for good. Yeah, like, it's Catholic Church, a global force for good. Bam, we got, just swap out a couple logos. It's the same thing.
That's great. Yeah, no, but I totally agree. We joke, but we need to re-masculinize the church and the priesthood, and it's going to happen one way or the other. We might shrink beforehand, but I think it's coming. Where the pendulum is swinging back. We've tried to support it for too long.
God's not going to let his church, fail. The path it's going to take is going to be interesting, and let's pray we can help out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
So, we successfully diagnosed the priest shortage, thanks to Anthony Esalen. Come up with a solution. Perfect. More people should really be listening to the show. There's some good stuff on here. Okay, let's see. Oh, I have a good article from 1 Peter 5. Just how evil is sodomy? The saints weigh in. So, this is actually from 2015. That was the year that the United States made sodomitical unions equal to unions between a man and a woman, according to national law. He says, in light of recent events, a theological concept that I've seen dusted off and put back into use with increasing frequency is that of a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. There are 4 such sins: murder, sodomy, oppression of the poor, and defrauding a worker of his wages. Each of these is considered especially egregious to God. While there were, until recently, civil legal restrictions on all 4, the first 2 in particular have been losing battles in the courts for at least a half century, with sodomy making huge legal advances in both Ireland and the United States in the past 60 days. Well, if they could see us now. But just how bad is sodomy really? If you listen to those sympathetic to those in homosexual relationships, you'd be led to believe that it's just a little harmless affection between people who are in love, and I'll add a little commentary, with their buttholes. So on the scale of serious sins, where does sodomy fall? At the blog Musings of a Pertinacious Papist, Philip Blosser cites St. Peter Damian, doctor of the church, as excerpted in a 2002 article by Randy Engels. And I'll read the quote here from St. Peter Damian, and then we'll talk about it. Without fail, it brings death to the body and destruction to the soul. It pollutes the flesh, extinguishes the light of the mind, expels the Holy Spirit from the temple of the human heart, and gives entrance to the devil, the stimulator of lust. It leads to error, totally removes truth from the deluded mind. It opens up hell and closes the gates of paradise. It is the vice that violates temperance, slays modesty, strangles chastity, and slaughters virginity. It defiles all things, sullies all things, pollutes all things. This vice excludes a man from the assembled choir of the church. It separates the soul from God to associate it with demons. Unmindful of God, he also forgets his own identity. This disease erodes the foundation of faith, saps the vitality of hope, dissolves the bond of love. It makes way with justice, demolishes fortitude, removes temperance, and blunts the edge of prudence. Whew. Boy.
Tell us how you really feel.
Man, so I ask you, dear listener, who do you think knows more about the truth of sodomy? Father Feelgood or Doctor of the Church St. Peter Damian?
Do we have James Martin on the Do we have James Martin on the line? Can we talk with him?
Father James. Yeah, that's actually why I found this article, because I was reading something from Church Militant on their Facebook page about he had a recent tweet storm about the lesbian who was fired from her job at a Catholic school for flagrantly boasting about her gay marriage on Facebook. So he was upset about that because he said that people weren't getting fired for other sins, like, well, anyway. So that's why I found
I forget if it was Father Z or the other one. They had some really good responses to that whole mess. Mm-hmm. But
so, I mean, there's, I know there's a lot of people in the church who don't think that being gay is a big deal. Well, I shouldn't say that, because it sort of implies that if you have same-sex attraction, that there's something wrong with you. I mean, there is. It's not the same as actually acting on those attractions, committing sodomy, so I shouldn't say that. But having gay sex is a big deal. And I can't remember the saint, but there was another saint who said that she had a vision of the type of demons it takes to actually get somebody to commit the act of sodomy, and they were the most ugly, vile demons they had ever seen. Obviously, this is some mystic, and I'm not saying that's binding on your conscience to believe that her visions were real, but just understand that it's a serious thing, and our culture is celebrating it. I call our culture the big gay empire, and I mean it. They're spreading this stuff all over the world. They're trying. I mean, it's truly diabolical. Truly diabolical.
So one thing, when reading this, you got to understand what sin is for this to make sense, right? That sin isn't just. It's not. I mean, it's just separation from God, but it also affects your own soul, right? The more you habitually sin, the more it deadens you. And, right, this is all just saying how, in particular, it's just a much more, I guess, virulent deadening of yourself, because, I guess in part because you're taking, a gift of God for the propagation of the species and creation of new souls, and you've turned it, so far against that. It's such a introspective, inward kind of action into the self that
yes,
societies and people that engage in it habitually it's eventually going to just inculcate those values into you more and more and more, and it'll just take you away from God farther and farther. Yeah.
Well, and the other, at a philosophical level, the other part of it is that God made us male and female. That's part of the plan, from the beginning. And a single person is one thing. That's a different thing entirely. But like someone who's someone who's sexually attracted and engaging with someone of the same sex, you're fundamentally out of balance. You're missing you're kind of missing half of humanity, and it will it warps you, it damages you. I mean, okay, be perfectly blunt, it's more than women usually do.
Oh, wait. I know you just made a great point, but you kind of tripped up. Can you repeat that last sentence?
I said, to be perfectly blunt, like, men want sex more than women usually do. And
more consistent,
by all accounts. Yes. And by all accounts, gay culture is, I mean, promiscuity is to a level that most straight people really have a hard time imagining. Why? Yeah. It's because it's men, and men, there's none of the restraint that a woman more naturally has toward these things. And so well, and it's also to take it to another, to connect it to another serious problem with our culture. I don't think there's any way imaginable that a Christian culture could have, or a post-Christian culture, I don't know, could have arrived at this point, not making normalized and widespread, because basically the without the use of contraception, you have to face what sex is.
Yeah,
you have to understand what's going on and what this is about. And if you take that out of the equation, and I mean, if you disconnect sex from reproduction, well, then why not? I mean, what's the difference? What's the difference if it's a man and a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, other than the higher domestic violence rates among lesbians?
Well, we don't get into that. No, I actually wanted to say I misremembered the quote about the demons and the gay sex, because it's quoted later on down in this article. St. Catherine of Siena writes of sodomy in what appears to be not her own mind, but God's. So it's a vision. And so God is speaking here, supposedly. It is not only that this sin stinks before me, who am the supreme and eternal truth. It does indeed displease me so much. I hold it in such abomination. For it alone I buried 5 cities by a divine judgment, my divine justice being no longer able to endure it. This sin not only displeases me, as I have said, but also the devils whom these wretches have made their masters. Not that the evil displeases them because they like anything good, but because their nature was originally angelic, and their angelic nature causes them to loathe the sight of the actual commission of this enormous sin. So let's just say, I don't think this is a private revelation, so it's probably not binding on the conscience of a Catholic, but let's just say that this is true. God is saying here that even demons are grossed out by gay sex. This is St. Catherine of Siena. just saying. Not some quack website I'm reading. So,
well, yeah, it's kind of weird to hear such explicit, condemnation. We aren't used to hearing it given in that form, right? And so what that's signifying is that, I think this gets to what you're saying earlier, that allowing these actions, saying that these things are okay in a society, what they're really doing is lying about who we are and what we're supposed to be as men and women. Mm-hmm. But if we get wrong who we are as men and women, we get Christianity wrong. We get Catholicism wrong. And if we do that, we are cut off from God. So, the whole issue of who we are as men and women is more and more, it seems extremely fundamental to the Catholic faith. And, as you start removing these ideas of who God made us to be, and how we're supposed to act with one another and what our faculties are for, our natural ends. If you just start saying we don't have final causes, we don't have ends for these things, then you can do whatever you want. If you can do whatever you want, that's the end of religion, and you're cut off. Like, all right, well, great, good luck with that society.
Well, and it's also
no transcendence. This is all you have, this life, so you might as well live it up, right?
Yeah.
And it's also just part of the general leftist idea that human beings are infinitely malleable, and that given the right set of circumstances, we can become anything society wants us to be, rather than an acknowledgement that no, there is such a thing as human nature. There are things that things that we ought to do, and there are rights inherent in us, and there are things that we ought not to do, and there are things that will damage us if we engage in them. And these things are not just socially constructed. These are not just made up for convenience or imposed by people in power. This is a reality of what we are. And if you want to install a never-ending tyranny that what is it? What's the a boot stamping on a human face forever? This is who was a socialist. Might have changed his mind if he'd stuck around much longer. But if you want to create a never-ending tyranny, these are ideas that you want to get out of the way. These are truths that you want to obscure as much as possible. Anyone in possession of those truths is a danger to what you want to do.
That's good. Well, did y'all have anything else on this very light topic?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
I might have to check out. I might have to check out for a minute. I'm gonna have to let me check on something at the house, and I will probably be back.
Okay. We could just do one more article here, James, from Crisis Magazine by Archbishop Charles J. Chaput. I think that's how you say his last name, isn't it?
I actually don't know. I've never heard it pronounced, so it's probably not Chaput.
Maybe it's Chaput. It could be Chaput.
I don't know. I like Chaput. It sounds dignified.
Dignified, yeah. Okay. All right. So speaking of George Orwell, he opens his article here. Memory, Sex, and the Making of the New Man. Kind of harkens back to our initial conversation.
Yeah.
George Orwell, quote, "Some ideas are so stupid that only an intellectual could believe them." So George Orwell, he's saying, Archbishop Charles Chaput, he's saying, "I'm not sure he ever actually said them, but in an age when gender is supposed to be fluid and the meaning of male and female has become ambiguous, they do ring true." So let's be clear about our purpose today. This is an address to a men's conference, I believe. So that's what he's talking about. Did you get a chance to look at this article?
I skimmed it and read more of the end.
Nice. Yeah, the end was good.
Yeah.
I thought we could kind of end on a high note, so let's talk about the end.
All right. So, skimming through, he hits, some of the stuff, we like to hear and remind ourselves of, C.S. Lewis talking about manly religion. And oh, shoot, I'm trying to find the line that I liked.
Well, he's sort of. I think he's trying to reframe the First Crusade in a more positive light, saying that these were manly Christians that were trying to protect pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem, and this is not something that we should look at in a negative light. This is a very heroic thing. That's part of what he was saying. And
oh
then,
yeah. The lead image having the Templar Knights,
yes.
being founded for that manly knighthood.
Right. So, yeah, and there's just a lot of misinformation and conspiracy theories about the Templars, the knights that perform this act. In fact, I just had lunch with a cradle Catholic from my diocese, and he was spouting all of these like nonsense conspiracy theories about the Templars and me, like they were true. Like, Catholics need to own up to how horrible the Crusades were, like stuff like that. It's infected our culture so bad.
Yeah. What was it? There's that one guy who has the book Glory of the Crusades, which I've never read, but with a title like The Glory of the Crusades, it's got to be at least worth a little bit.
On the show.
Yeah. He was on Catholic Answers several times talking about it, and I enjoyed it. And I've got an audiobook waiting for learning about the Templars. But yeah, right, but this idea that, as Christian men, as Catholic men, you can get out there and, be active. Like, it is your duty to stand up and fight for these things, right? We can't just sit around and, passively let the culture go by. Even if you're not, screaming in public or Facebook arguing all day, live your own life at least. And I think this is what he gets into in the article, right, with this new knighthood.
That's right.
That it's a vocation that starts with a lot of things. That's better yourself. And this is a theme I see a lot. I saw in that book we talked about and elsewhere, right? Like you got to get your house in order. Get yourself right with God, and that's at least the start.
Clean your room, Bucko.
Go ahead.
No, it was just Jordan Peter. Clean your room, Bucko.
I mean, right? Like, it sounds so simple, right? But for some people, maybe, yeah. Like,
I don't know, cleaning my room. Being honest.
I mean, align yourself with a good that's greater than yourself and work toward it, right? That's pretty good advice.
What you were saying, James, it almost sounds like what the Muslims say about jihad. People go, jihad's such a horrible thing. And they say, no, jihad is an inner struggle. It's a spiritual struggle about getting. So, well, maybe this isn't a good analogy, but it almost kind of is, because Islam still has that warrior mentality for their men, and it expresses itself in very violent and ugly ways, and that's because they're heretical, demonic religion. But I'm saying we can learn a few things from them, and part of that is to not extract the warrior masculinity from your faith and your culture, because it's very important,
Well,
yeah,
and this is actually an idea I've had in mind for some time, and I did a video of my own on this subject, which is good is not nice.
Yep.
We were never called to be nice. We were called to be good, and that was to reference the indirect namer of the podcast. That was one thing I really like from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was disappointed that it was not in the movie version, because what is it, when the Pevensey kids find out that Aslan is a lion, one of them asks, well, he's a lion, is he quite safe? And the beaver they're talking to replies, safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he's not safe, but he's good. And our culture has largely
has largely tried to merge those two things. Has said that safe and nice are the same thing, and safe and harmless are the same thing, and they're they're not remotely.
Yeah, and they say that love is no longer an ordering toward the good, right? We need a phrase tough love, even though tough is included in love, and then not even that's allowed anymore. I really like the Aslan as a lion. There's a quote in Augustine's City of God where he refers to Jesus' resurrection with the phrase, "So the lion roared." And if C.S. Lewis didn't take it straight out of there, I don't know, it would have been perfect. But yeah, right, like not safe, but correct and good. And that's a really good description of I think the Cardinals' new knighthood here, right? Good, but it's not going to be safe. So, get on with it, I guess.
Yeah, he says, I'll just read from the article here. Men need a challenge. Men need to test and prove their worth. Men feel most alive when they're giving themselves to some purpose higher than their own comfort. This is why young men join the Marines or Rangers or SEALs. They do it not despite it being hard, but exactly because it's hard, because it hurts, because they want to be the best and earn a place among brothers who are also the very best. Men joined the early Capuchins and Jesuits not to escape the world, but to transform it, to convert the world by demanding everything a man had, every drop of his energy, love, talent, and intelligence in service to a mission bigger and more important than any individual ego or appetite. This is why the ideal of knighthood, despite all the video game fantasies and Freemason conspiracies that the modern world tries to attach to it, still has such a strong hold on the hearts and imaginations of men. As men, we're hardwired by nature and confirmed by the word of God to do three main things: to provide, to protect, and to lead. Not for our own sake, not for our own empty vanities and appetites, but in service to others. And that, dear listeners, is how you wage jihad against the inner bug man.
There you go. That's the tagline for the show.
Yes, actually, that'll probably be. I usually based on being.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is he has a part in here. He's talking about other conceptions of the new man, the new Soviet man, or the new Aryan man, Aryan. He says they were creatures of ideology. They were meant to be healthy, learned, unselfish, and zealous in advancing communism or National Socialism without the help of any new god or any god. Both of these new men failed. And he goes on to talk about how that fails because, we can't erase the past. I think the other reason they fail is we need God's grace. We can't perfect ourselves under our own power. So movements to perfect ourselves that don't include God can't work. And so we've always got to be reaching out for grace to be able to improve ourselves.
Very good. Very good. Well, y'all have anything else?
Yeah.
No? Good. Well, gentlemen, thanks for coming on tonight, and God be with you.
God be with you. Have a good one.
With you.
Night, guys.